Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Anthony Bellow, board member at the Merchants House Museum, located just a few blocks south of here. And you're probably wondering what we're doing here today. Today marks the 150th anniversary to the day of President Abraham Lincoln's funeral procession, marching up from City Hall, where his body lay in state for 24 hours, marching up Broadway to 14th Street, Union Square, and then up 5th Avenue to 34th Street and the railroad terminal on its way to Albany. Lincoln's death and funeral here in New York marked the largest public outburst of grief and mourning in the city's history. Believe it or not, much more profound, much more observed, even than 9/11. And yet, when we learned that there was no public ceremony in honor of President Lincoln's 150th anniversary of being here in New York today, the Merchants House Museum felt something needed to be done to mark this occasion. And so we're doing this impromptu, short, honorary event in Lincoln's memory. So thank you all for being with us. At this moment, we'd like to unveil a small wreath the Merchants House has prepared. Ms. Treadwell.
Mr. Treadwell.
On April 25th, 1865, as the funeral procession passed Union Square, an oration was given in Lincoln's honor, specially written for the occasion. You are about to hear an abridged version of that oration given exactly 150 years ago today by our own Dale Vandersand, the director of the Bond Street Utopian Singing Society, which is the performing arts group in residence at the Merchants House. Dale?
Bravo.
This oration was given by George Bancroft, who was the former Secretary of the Navy and the United States Minister to the United Kingdom. Our grief and horror at the crime which has clothed the continent in mourning find no adequate expression in words and no relief in tears. The President of the United States of America has fallen by the hands of an assassin. Neither the office with which he was invested by the approved choice of a mighty people, nor the most simple-hearted kindliness of nature could save him from the fiendish passions of relentless fanaticism. The wailings of the millions attend his remains as they are borne in solemn procession over our great rivers, along the seaside, beyond the mountains, across the prairie, to their resting place in the valley of the Mississippi. His funeral knell vibrates through the world, and the friends of freedom of every tongue and in every clime are his mourners. Too few days have passed away since Abraham Lincoln stood in the flush of vigorous manhood to permit any attempt at an analysis of his character or an exposition of his career. We find it hard to believe that his large eyes, which in their softness and beauty expressed nothing but benevolence and gentleness, are closed in death. We almost look for the pleasant smile that brought out more vividly the earnest cast of his features, which were serious even to sadness. A few years ago, he was a village attorney, engaged in the support of a rising family unknown to fame, scarcely named beyond his neighborhood. His administration made him the most conspicuous man in his country and drew on him first the astonished gaze and then the respect and admiration of the world. Those who come after us will decide how much of the wonderful results of his public career is due to his own good common sense, his shrewd sagacity, readiness of wit, quick interpretation of the public mind, his rare combination of fixedness and pliancy, his steady tendency of purpose, how much to the American people who, as he walked with them side by side, inspired him with their own wisdom and energy. And how much to the overruling laws of the moral world by which the selfishness of evil is made to defeat itself. but after every allowance, it will remain that members of the government which preceded his administration opened the gates to treason and he closed them, that when he went to Washington, the ground on which he trod shook under his feet, and he left the Republic on a solid foundation. That traitors had seized public forts and arsenals, and he recovered them for the United States, to whom they belonged. That the capital, which he found the abode of slaves, is now the home only of the free. That the boundless public domain, which was grasped at, and in a great measure held for the diffusion of slavery, is now irrevocably devoted to freedom. That then men talked a jargon of a balance of power in a republic between slave states and free states. And now, the foolish words are blown away forever by the breath of Maryland, Missouri, and Tennessee. That a terrible cloud of political heresy rose from the abyss, threatening to hide the light of the sun, and under its darkness, a rebellion was growing into indefinable proportions. Now the atmosphere is purer than ever before, and the insurrection is vanishing away. The country is cast into another mold, and the gigantic system of wrong, which had been the work of more than 2 centuries, is dashed down, we hope, forever. And as to himself personally, he was then scoffed at by the proud as unfit for his station. And now, against the usage of later years, and in spite of numerous competitors, he was the unbiased and the undoubted choice of the American people for a second term of service. Through all the mad business of treason, he retained the sweetness of a most placable disposition, and the slaughter of myriads of the best on the battlefield, and the more terrible destruction of our men in captivity by the slow torture of exposure and starvation had never been able to provoke him into harboring one vengeful feeling or one purpose of cruelty. How shall the nation most completely show its sorrow at Mr. Lincoln's death? How shall it best honor his memory? There can be but one answer. He was struck down when he was highest in its service, and in strict conformity with duty was engaged in carrying out principles affecting its life, its good name, and its relations to the cause of freedom and the progress of mankind. Wreath must take the character of action and breath itself forth in the assertion of the policy to which he fell a victim. The standard which he held in his hand must be uplifted again, higher and more firmly than before, and must be carried on to triumph. Above everything else, his proclamation of the 1st day of January 1863, declaring throughout the parts of the country in rebellion the freedom of all persons who had been held as slaves, must be affirmed and maintained. It has been said that we are at war, and that emancipation is not a belligerent right. In a civil war, when rebellion is crushed, the old government is restored and its courts resume their jurisdiction. So it is with us. The United States have courts of their own that must punish the guilt of treason and vindicate the freedom of persons whom the fact of rebellion has set free. Nor may it be said that because slavery existed in most of the states when the Union was formed, it cannot rightfully be interfered with now. A change has taken place, such as Madison foresaw, and since that time the attempt has been made in what are called slave states to render the condition of slavery perpetual. And events have proved with the clearness of demonstration that a constitution which seeks to continue a caste of hereditary bondmen through endless generations is inconsistent with the existence of republican institutions. So then the new president and the people of the United States must insist that the proclamation of freedom shall stand as a reality. And moreover, the people must never cease to insist that the Constitution shall be so amended as utterly to prohibit slavery on any part of our soil forevermore. The removal of the cause of the rebellion is not only demanded by justice, it is the policy of mercy, making room for a wider clemency. It is the part of order against the chaos of controversy. Its success brings with it true reconcilement, a lasting peace, a continuous growth of confidence through an assimilation of the social condition. Here is the fitting expression of the morning of today, and let no lover of his country say that this warning is uncalled for. The cry is delusive that slavery is dead. Even now, it is nerving itself for a fresh struggle for continuance. No sentiment of despair may mix with our sorrow. We owe it to the memory of the dead. We owe it to the cause of popular liberty throughout the world that the sudden crime which has taken the life of the President of the United States shall not produce the least impediment in the smooth course of public affairs. This great city, in the midst of unexampled emblems of deeply seated grief, has sustained itself with composure and magnanimity. It has nobly done its part in guarding against the derangement of business or the slightest shock to public credit. The enemies of the Republic put to it the severest trial, but the voice of faction has not been heard. Doubt and despondency have been unknown. In serene majesty, the country rises in the beauty and strength and hope of youth and proves to the world the quiet energy and the durability of institutions growing out of the reason and affectations of the people. Heaven has willed it that the United States shall live. The nations of the earth cannot spare them. All the worn-out aristocracies of Europe saw in the spurious feudalism of slaveholding their strongest outpost and banded themselves together with the deadly enemies of our national life. If the old world will discuss the respective advantages of oligarchy or equality, of the union of church and state, or the rightful freedom of religion, of land accessible to the many, or the land monopolized by an ever-decreasing number of the few, the United States must live to control the decision by their quiet and unobtrusive example. It has often and truly been observed that the trust and affection of the masses gather naturally round an individual. If the inquiry is made whether the man so trusted and beloved shall elicit from the reason of the people enduring institutions of their own, or shall sequester political power for a superintending dynasty, the United States must live to solve the problem. Abraham Lincoln has fallen a martyr. His death, which was meant to sever it beyond repair, binds it more closely and more firmly than ever. The blow aimed at him was aimed not at the native of Kentucky, not at the citizen of Illinois, but at the man who, as president in the executive branch of the government, stood as the representative of every man in the United States. The object of the crime was the life of the whole people, and it wounds the affections of the whole people. From Maine to the southwest boundary on the Pacific, it makes us one. The country may have needed an imperishable grief to touch its inmost feeling. The grave that receives the remains of Lincoln receives the costly sacrifice to the Union. The monument which will rise over his body will bear witness to the Union. His enduring memory will assist during countless ages to bind the states together and to incite to the love of our one undivided, indivisible country. Peace to the ashes of our departed friend, the friend of his country and his race. He was happy in his life, for he was the restorer of the Republic. He was happy in his death, for his martyrdom will plead forever for the union of the states and the freedom of man.
Thank you, Dale Vandersand, for that reading of the oration that was given right here in Union Square on April 25th, 1865, as President Lincoln's body passed on 14th Street on its way from Broadway to Fifth Avenue en route to Albany, and the rest of his funeral train on his way to interment. Now we are going to continue with the hymn that was written and performed, sung by the thousands of people who gathered here at Union Square on that day 150 years ago. Many of you have the song sheets. Members of the Bond Street Euterpean Singing Society are here to lead you in song. We will be performing a program of songs that were written in 1865 in honor of Lincoln tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock at the Merchants House Museum, 29 East 4th Street. There's still a few tickets left, so if you'd like to participate, you may still do so. But please join us now in singing the hymn sung here 150 years ago today.
Thank you.
its staff, its volunteers. I'd like to thank you all for participating today. When we learned that the 150th anniversary of President Lincoln's funeral procession in New York was going to pass by forgotten and unobserved, we said we needed to do something about it. You have all helped to keep the memory of that great man and this event, which through New York City in abject and profound mourning, alive, lest it be forgotten forever. Thank you. Merchant's House is open to the public. There is currently an exhibition on the funeral in place at the Merchant's House until the end of June, and there will be a performance tomorrow evening of the songs that were written in honor of Lincoln. If anybody else would care to have information, this young lady has some available for you right now. Thank you all so much for participating, and have a lovely weekend. Thank you.